Hello, I'm Ian Turkington. I'm the VP for Architecture and APIs here at TM Forum, and I'm joined today by Bob Titus, the CTO from Netcracker. And we're going to be having a short chat about the business case for the adoption of Cloud Native BSS and OSS. Bob, it is great to have you with us today. It'd be so much nicer if we were sitting having a proper fireside chat in a room together, but in today's world, we will just have to make do with these virtual meetings. You're very welcome.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
So, as you know, we're going to chat about the business case for the adoption of Cloud Native BSS and OSS. Now, hopefully our audience are very familiar with what we mean by business case. They're very familiar with what we mean by BSS, business support systems, and OSS, operational support systems. But in my experience, Cloud Native means different things to different people. So just really to set the foundation, make sure we're all on the same page, I'd like to begin by just saying, what do you mean by Cloud Native and true Cloud Native?
Sure. So the way we think about cloud and cloud native is from multiple dimensions. The first, of course, is the actual software architecture. Is it microservices based? Is it componentized as opposed to a monolithic platform? So that's sort of the foundation. Second, we look at can it be containerized and deployed on any cloud, whether that's an internal telco cloud or a public cloud or some other private cloud. So that's very important. Next is how do you automate that in terms of CI/CD tool chains? Can you leverage DevOps processes around the software? All of that lends itself to cloud native and is part of being cloud native. Last but not least is being open. That's leveraging open platforms, open APIs, having an open ecosystem that you can plug into. So we look at all of those dimensions, and those are all the litmus test of what is cloud native.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I'm going to remember that one and use it myself. And I think the reason I asked that, a lot of people often they think of going to the cloud as just lift and shift, and there is obviously so much more to it, as you've just explained there. So, based on that definition, what's your experience? Where do you think telcos are on this journey, where they're going cloud native properly rather than just lift and shift?
I think they're still more towards the beginning. I think the adoption has been a little bit slower than the industry needs, and that's for many reasons. One of the primary reasons is due to complexity. Service providers have lots of integrated systems. They have multiple stacks, and they're faced with the age-old challenge of how do you change the engine while you're still flying the plane? So they are looking at different approaches. You mentioned lift and shift. That's just one approach. Another approach is to re-architect and re-platform existing systems. Another approach could be to just put in greenfield cloud native platforms for a single line of business or a set of services. The other aspect is service providers need to look at, do they take a component by component approach or do they look at more of a full stack approach? How do they get there? How many steps? How many phases? It's not simply flipping a switch and all of a sudden you're at cloud native. For most of them, it's going to be a multi-step journey that's going to take a while to get done.
Yeah, and I think what's certainly what I'm seeing, lots of telcos, if not all of them, are on this journey. I don't think any of them have finished yet, but they're all on the same journey. Moving to the business case and the business drivers side of this, why do you think cloud native is important now? What's changed recently, which is making this an important thing to be aiming for?
Well, if you look at the technology and how it can be adopted, our experience is it really lends itself to 4 key areas where you can reap a lot of benefits. The first and most important one is business agility. So here I'm talking about rapid time to market. How can service providers dynamically adjust their customer experience? How can they enable and work with partners very easily? And all of this lends itself to rapid innovation. So how can they innovate the products and services? How can they make sure that they're serving their customers the best way possible? And that business agility is enabled by cloud native software. It's enabled by the processes you can put around that. So that's a key area. The second area is really IT efficiency. So when we talk about the system and the software itself, is it low code? Is it evergreen and always kept up to date? Can you update single components rather than having to deploy massive systems all at the same time? So the goal is always to have faster, less effort IT, and Cloud Native certainly delivers on that promise in terms of its architecture, in terms of the way you can work with it, in terms of the way you can automate it. The third area is really around the operations itself. So when we think about cloud, there's some benefits in the platforms themselves. You can get dynamic scalability. You can get resiliency in the cloud. So built-in high availability, disaster recovery, enhanced security, and from a deployment perspective, cloud native software and technologies allow you to do things like blue, green, and canary deployments very easily. And all of this from an operations perspective leads to better SLAs and better resiliency of the platform itself. The last area that we always look at, of course, is total cost of ownership. The ability to leverage open platforms, software as a service, commercial models, buying less hardware. All of this is going to enable the service provider to do more with less. So that total cost of ownership is one of the other major benefits of cloud native.
Yeah. So if we're thinking of actually building this business case, I'm assuming really, and I'm imagining, I don't want you to necessarily repeat the same answer, but we've got the business justification in sense of improved agility, IT efficiency, improved operations, obviously TCO as well. Are there any sort of top tips really you would give in terms of how do you bring all that together to make a really solid business case?
So you have to look at all of those benefits, but then you also have to look at, what is the investment profile required to achieve that journey, and really having the right strategy and right roadmap is very important. And if I look at, what one of the most critical ingredients is, it's really having the right mindset. So service providers need to think like a new entrant across all of these dimensions. There will always be constraints in their legacy architectures. There will always be constraints in terms of funding in the business. But having the right mindset, thinking like a new entrant, looking at what should the target state be, what is the optimal, what is the ideal. I think that's probably the most important thing when looking at this cloud journey, not just from a business case perspective, but making sure you don't have any regrets or stumbles along the way. Is start with the right end set in mind, and then move towards that with the right strategy and the right roadmap.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things, in fact, we talked about this just earlier before the recording started, the risks of not doing it. So what I think that's always an important part of the business case. What would you say are the downsides to a service provider who either they do it too slowly or they don't do it at all? What are they going to miss out on?
Well, I think the most obvious one is they'll be less competitive and they'll have a higher cost structure in terms of how they operate. So that alone, should motivate service providers to make the journey and to make it faster rather than slower. I think there's another often overlooked aspect to this is that the faster they get to the cloud, the more attractive they'll be as an employer, because the people side of this is important. Service providers need to win the war for talent, and other industries are moving very quickly. We're seeing shortages in various markets of skilled IT resources, and most service providers that I talk to these days are trying to boost their internal skill set and capabilities. So being able to attract employees with the latest, cloud native software and technologies that will allow them to not only retain the good people they have, but go out and boost their skill sets and boost their resource pool appropriately. And it is an important recruiting tool and retention tool.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in terms of the war for talent, because it is an increasingly well, I was going to say it's increasingly scarce. I don't think software engineering is scarce. There's loads of it, but the demand massively outstrips the supply, I think, at the moment. Right. And everybody wants to get the best people engaged. So let's assume the service provider gets their business case approved and they're going for it. Just in terms of challenges, what do you think are the big barriers that they might not see that they really have to overcome to really enable this successful transformation to cloud native?
Well, along the theme of the talent, the people transformation takes time, right? They have to learn new tools, learn new platforms. They're going to be using new methodologies. So that requires a lot of investment in training to get the internal teams up to speed and make sure that that transition is smooth and doesn't disrupt the business or the operations. So that's a very important consideration. The other thing we encourage our service providers to have is a very clear public versus private cloud strategy. So when do you use which and why? What we've often seen in service providers is they're deciding on the fly, project by project. Is this project going to go in the telco cloud? Is it going to go in the public cloud? And there's no real guidelines for how that decision is being made. That can result in less than optimal deployments and missed opportunities for benefits and savings. So understanding what you're going to move to the cloud, whether it's internal or public, why and how, those are critical things to define up front as part of the strategy. So you're not trying to decide that with each different program and component that you're looking at.
Yeah, I think that idea of having a clear strategy and understand when and why is absolutely critical. Not just in private cloud, public cloud. I've seen that all my career, where big architectural decisions were more often made based on the personalities that were involved. And you almost knew when you saw a decision, you thought, oh, that decision was made because so-and-so was on that team. And that's not the right way to make decisions. You got the same people promoting the same thing all the time. But having a very clear, I think a one-size-fits-all doesn't work. But when you're trying to say it depends, you have to be very clear on what it depends upon and have those rules very clearly understood as well. Believe it or not, Bob, we are reaching the end of our time together. We don't have much more minutes left. What I always like to do at the end is give you an opportunity just for a final comment to leave with the viewers. Many of the people watching this will be embarking upon their own transformation. They'll be moving into the cloud. They'll be moving to cloud native. So just if you'd like to leave a word of advice, a nugget of wisdom that you'd like them to take away with them to help them on their journey.
Well, I think, from our perspective and our experience, the benefits of cloud are there. The business case is positive, and those benefits should not be ignored. But I also think, one of the most important things is to have the right partners as you go on this cloud journey. So who has the right skills, who has the right experience, who can help you with, not just the software solutions, but the business case and the roadmap and the strategy, as I was explaining, and that's where we've invested a lot, and that's where we add a lot of value. So I don't think anyone should be doing this journey alone. Surround yourself with great partners, and that will make all the difference in the world.
Well, thank you very much. We are more or less out of time, so it's been great having this chance to have a chat with you about this subject. Thank you very much for your time today, Bob.
Thank you, Anna. It's been great.
And for everybody watching, thank you for watching, and goodbye.